So we're moving along to Compressor right now. How many people actually use Compressor? Actually, yeah, everybody. How many people actually understand Compressor? Yeah. Well, this guy understands it because he's written several books on it. He's also authored several DVDs. He's also the voice of a lot of those tutorials we're playing tonight from the Apple.com website. He works for Whipple Training, and he also works for himself. He's trained hundreds of people in compression. He knows more about compression than you do, so please welcome Brian Gary.
Thank you, Michael. So, in the interest of brevity and the fact that it is Compressor, I thought that I would attempt to reduce my entire presentation into a haiku. But then I thought, you know, this is Michael Horton, and it's a Final Cut Pro user group, so probably, I don't know, maybe a limerick is more in order. So here goes. There once was an app named Compressor, and it treated me like a grand inquisitor's confessor. But with every release, there was hope, there was peace. And now in coding, it's no longer a stressor. There we go. So, and that's it, because with the release of Compressor 3.5, all the problems have been solved. The world is right. Nama freaking stay. Yes. So, you know what's interesting is, you know, Michael was talking about those videos, and really, you know, I just have I preloaded the page. If you go to Apple's resources page, there is an amazing amount of free content that's up there that really takes you from the what's new to the tips to the workflows. And if you haven't gone to the resources page, and again, you can see, right, this is the Final Cut Studio site, and then there's the links across the top. One of them is resources. It's kind of buried a little bit, the resources link, so a lot of people didn't even know that it was there. But again, go there and watch the videos. Because whether you want to know what's new or you want to know a different workflow or a way to use all the apps in the studio, there's a tremendous amount of free resources up there for you. So I would definitely go and check that out. With that said, I think an inordinate amount of focus gets placed, especially around a release, on features, on the minutia. And we all get kind of myopic and we just focus in and we start to judge a release based on, does it have enough features? Is there enough cool stuff? Does it wow me? And I think that that kind of takes away from really why we're all here. We're here because we've chosen Final Cut Pro or Final Cut Studio, but we're here because we're storytellers. And if you come to these meetings long enough, I think that you kind of get, you know, the feel that that's why everybody's here. And, you know, we've kind of come together as creatives, as artists, you know, even Compressor, there is some art there. And we have come together, and our goal is to tell a story, whether that story is a promo, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a feature film, whether it's a television series, doesn't matter, commercial, they're all stories. And you're using Final Cut Pro and now Final Cut Studio to tell your stories. So I think that when a release comes out and everyone's a feature this or feature that, I'm really not going to talk about features tonight because one, you can go watch those movies and, you know, they may impress you, they may not, the features. Well, hopefully the movies do. But in all seriousness, I think what we should be focused on is, does this change the way we work? Does it make telling the story easier? Does it make telling the story more productive? Do we have a few more creative tools to tell our story? Because let's all face it, in about 3 or 4 weeks after you install the new version of Studio, you're going to pop out the blade tool. You're going to use the arrow tool and you're going to move things around and you might use some of these new features. But gone are those kind of wow moments where, you know, when they added multicam or they added, you know, HD editing. I mean, it's not really about that anymore. So I think as I wanted to focus today, and again, I'm going to give Michael an article that kind of addresses some of these things, so you'll be able to go and revisit some of these ideas, which is, how does Compressor, you know, interact with the rest of the studio and change the way we work in general? And I think the first thing that comes to mind the first thing that I thought about is, and again, I had to kind of step back, is they made this big release about these batch templates. Again, I mean, what does that mean? Batch template doesn't really tell me anything. But if you kind of step back and think about, I'll use my friend Steve Cantor's word. I've been working with him on a project, and I hear him use the word paradigm. And so there's a paradigm shift that's happened in Compressor. Because the cost of entry into Compressor was always a need to have some knowledge somewhere about encoding. If you wanted to make a DVD, you kind of needed to know that you needed to make these 2 elementary streams, and then you made those streams, and then you went to another application, whether it was DVD Studio Pro or some other application off the Mac, and you made your DVD. If you wanted to create something for the web, well, you could kind of go through the menus, and you might find as video podcasting or podcasting, and you might get lucky and you might find the right choice. This is especially if you didn't know what you're doing. So there was a lot of fear or intimidation, I should probably say, that came along with Compressor, because you open up and it's like, I don't know, it's empty. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I start looking through some settings and maybe throw this one up. Oh, that doesn't look so good. But what they changed with the batch templates, and why I use that word paradigm shift, is that it's a complete change in focus of the application. Because by using a batch template, you actually don't choose the files you want to make. You choose the thing you want to make to deliver ultimately. And Compressor then does and goes and makes the files for you. And in case of a DVD or a Blu-ray disc, it actually goes and burns the disc. So all I need to know is, what do I want to make? Batch templates come up. Blu-ray, DVD, I got an Apple TV, yes, there we go. And then the combination of the targets, which are those encoding settings that you had to fish for before, and the job actions that do the things after the after the encode, which is like burn the disk or move it into my iTunes library, are all done automatically for you. So now that cost of entry into Compressor is really just, what do you want to make? And then what I want to show you is, we're going to launch Compressor. And when it launches for the first time, I'm going to move this window size down a little bit. Let's see. Okay, so first, when you first launch Compressor, I'll fix the window size in a second, you get this batch template chooser, that's what it's called. And from here, I don't see MPEG. I don't see H.264. I don't see any of these things that are like, I don't know. I see publish to YouTube, create a DVD. These are things I understand. I get it. And if I've never done any encoding before, this is not intimidating to me. Because someone has said, hey, can you make me a DVD? Yeah, I can. Now I just open up Compressor and, yes I can. I can make the DVD. So this whole shift in thinking about how you interact with Compressor is really the nature of how Compressor has changed. Compressor now creates finished things for you. That's why they use the term publishing. You've actually created the final media, not just the files that are a stop along this process to make that media, which is the way it was before. You wanted to make a DVD, you had to make the 2 files, and then once you created those encodes, then you'd have to go into another program to make it. That's huge. That's a massive change, and kind of like, it's almost like they stepped back and said, let's change the focus of this application and have it do something that it's never done before. Actually create something that's final. So the other thing that I think that so this is now, it has lowered your cost of entry into the application. I would consider this an entirely beginner's workflow with no need of any knowledge of encoding whatsoever. But what's nice about it is that you can also use this as an educational tool to help yourself. Because we all know the drill. You got to go out, you're hustling, you're selling yourself. You always are overselling your skills, and then you figure, you know what, I'm smart enough, I'll go out and figure it out after the fact. Oh yeah, keep laughing, Yeah. So, what I can do now is, let's just take a look. I click on this DVD, and look, before I've even done it, I haven't even added any media. A little window pops up and it says, oh, look, MPEG 2, Dolby Audio. Okay. So now it's starting to educate me as to these are the types of things. If I want to create one DVD, well, that's kind of interesting. I actually need to create 2 files. Who knew? iDVD, I just took the movie in and it spit out a disc and it was great, except the menus. So, same thing here. I can click on Publish to Apple TV and they're like, oh, H.264, I've heard about people talking about that. And so the Apple TV that I have sitting there connected to my television, wow, that must use H.264. So again, not to belabor the fact, but this is a good way to start training yourself. It's almost like training wheels inside a compressor. So if I were to select this, let's go back to the Blu-ray, and I'll click Choose. And you can see it does a couple of things. Again, still haven't even brought any media in. It's created the 2 assets that I need in order to create the DVD, the Blu-ray disc. And up here in the corner, I have this little Create Blu-ray disc. I'm going to see if I can change my layouts to make it a little bit smaller. Let's see. This window here is smaller, so I'm going to move this over a little bit. So if I actually click on this job, you see something new to the new version of Compressor, job action. There used to be actions inside, like if I click, just for an example, if I click on the video target and I choose actions, there used to be very simple actions, these are called setting actions, that allowed me to send myself an email or run an Apple script once the job had finished encoding. But now I have these job actions that are actually quite powerful. And for here you can see I'm actually going to be making a very simple screener-like DVD. And I can do some customizations or not. It's a very interesting thing, is that if I decide to not do anything in here, I have no alerts that's telling me, which I'll show you an example of an alert message that you might get. I could have just put a piece of media in and click submit, be on my way, and then eventually, it'll do the encode, and then it'll ask me for a disc, and I pop a disc in. If I've got a Blu-ray burner, I can insert a Blu-ray. If I don't, I can use my super drive to create another type of media that, well, Apple says it's going to play. So, in all seriousness, it's called an AVC HD media. You can burn onto red laser discs like DVD5s, DVD9s, normal DVDs. And for the most part, what I've found, and again, I think Bruce probably has done, Bruce Nazarian, this is the DVD guy, the digital guy, he's done a lot more testing than I have for a broader spectrum for DVD and Blu-ray distribution. But in my testing, I'm a television producer and I also work in feature films. And so to me, this is great because one of my shows is HD and I also cut the show. And now I can send to the other people a quick screener of what it's going to look like when we actually broadcast, what it's going to look like in HD, because they can pop it into a PlayStation 3. Plays great. I haven't had any problems with burned media, either Blu-ray or AVC HD discs in a PlayStation 3. And now they're watching it in high definition. That's pretty cool. But the thing is, I don't even need to make any changes here. Or I could, pimp it out and put a background in, put the logo, maybe come in here and change the disc template to something else. One that's got motion to it. Ooh, it's actually changing colors. So again, very simple. And then all I would need to do is import a piece of media and the help documents, or basically give you a couple of steps and ways to put it in. I could just control click or right click, choose a file. And for example, I have here an episode of Speed Freaks, which is the television show that I work on. And there, it's ready to go. So what I can do now is I can just submit the batch and it'll encode away. And since I'm on my laptop here, it hasn't said to me, hey, wait a minute, you're on this little laptop. You can't make a Blu-ray on that laptop. No, it'll let me make it and it will assess the hardware that I have. In this case, it notices that I only have an internal drive, and so my options for burning are only to make it AVC HD. Or I could burn it to a disk image render this to a disk image and then burn it later or give it to somebody on a hard drive and they could burn it to a Blu-ray disc. So I think the whole point in this is all about the simplicity. I mean, I could bore you to tears up here and we could talk about, what's the best bit rate for MPEG-2 encoding? And then, everyone is just like leaving for an early break. So my goal is to say, you don't have to be that person. You don't have to be the total engineer in order to now create media that, especially for inside of your workflow. Again, I produce this show for television. 90% of the stuff that I make for every single episode never goes to air. It's for my collaborators. It's for the people that I'm working with. It's now I can send it up to my mobile me account and have them look at it that way. Because, one producer's in New York, another one's in Florida, they're all over the place. So it's just that final thing that I'm worried about that's going to broadcast, or in the event that we make a Blu-ray that's for mass distribution, but then I won't use this tool, I'll use something else. That's not what it's for. It's for collaboration inside and out of Final Cut Studio with the people you're working with during post-production. So the other thing is, just to give you an example, let me do file, new batch from template. This time I'm going to choose publish to mobile me, and create a new one here. You can see now I have an alert. So this is a signal to me that, oh, I guess I can't actually publish this right away, and it's because it needs a login. So it's like, oh, of course, if you want to publish to my mobile me, you need a login, a username and a password. So again, this redesign of Compressor is really subtle. But I would hesitate to start focusing on specific features because it's really, for lack of using a big word, a gestalt approach. It's the sum of all these little parts that really makes this a change in Compressor that is much bigger than adding a batch template and adding in Blu-ray. It's that ability to be able to create something stress-free, or with at least a minimal amount of stress. So the other, we'll talk more, and I'm sure people have specific questions, about, this type of target or this type of encode. And again, we'll answer those in the Q&A, because one of the points, there's a couple of golden rules, and I'll give you one of them, and that is all your media is unique. If you ask me, how do I encode this? I'll say, I don't know, let me see it. And that's the question that you need to be asking yourself. How should I encode this? Maybe I should watch it. And watch it all the way through and say, okay, all right, that's challenging. Oh, that's, I look at these, Speed Freaks, all about motorsports. So I'm looking at it going, oh boy, the talking head, that's gonna be easy, but it goes right into, Casey Kane, and he's out on the, Indy 500 track, or wherever he's racing, Brickyard, whatever the case is. See how much I know about motorsports. I just put a NASCAR guy in the wrong race. So, but we'll just let that slide. So the other thing I want to look at is the interaction with the other members of the studio. And again, that's a very, very large change. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do, you notice how when I first launched Compressor it was kind of slow? And you may have launched this new version of Compressor and you're kind of waiting for a minute, and then that template window comes down, and then you can pick the templates. Well, what it's doing is some of those templates need to assess your hardware every single time that, that window drops down. So it needs to look to see what drives you have connected, etc. And so if you don't want that pause, because you remember you saw that I was it was easy for me to get to the templates by going into the file menu, new batch from template. 4 minutes? Okay, no problem. And so if I go into the preferences, I can just change this to use blank template. So the next time I open up Compressor, it won't be slow at all. You can see if I launch it right now, you'll see that it actually comes, oops, not iTunes. Damn you. So launch Compressor, and you can see, boom, comes up. So the other thing I want to show you is your interaction with Final Cut. From time immemorial, Larry and I have gone at loggerheads over the export via Compressor command. As for a while it was good, and then he'd be winning, and it would be bad. And then I'd say, no, it's good again, and you can do it. And something would come out, and no, it's bad again, Gary, you can't do it. So one of the differences now, though, is the fact that one of the main issues, regardless of quality, because we'll probably always have that debate because the QuickTime codecs are constantly going to be changing, and the quality will come in and out. But the workflow, again, the workflow, and I need to punch myself in the face because I hate that word. And I just got finished writing the compressor book, and I got to the point where I was like, I can't say workflow one more time. I can't do it. How about pathway, corridor, you know, sexy velvet tunnel, anything, anything but workflow. So I'm sorry, forgive me. But what changes is the fact that it no longer locks up compressor. So I can now send from Final Cut, oh yes, it no longer, thank you, no longer locks up Final Cut. So I can now, love to the Apple gods in the sky. So now I can choose my sequence, go File, Send to Compressor. Compressor will launch. You have your normal Final Cut. Let's just do something kind of simple. I'll just do a little ProRes proxy. And I'm going to start encoding this sequence. Just hit Submit. You got it. And just so you know, I'm not lying. There it is. I'll just wait for it to actually start encoding. And so there. So now it started encoding. Normally, this would bring us back to a window inside of Final Cut that said, you know, leave it alone, processing frames. So not only can I go back and continue editing, maybe I want to edit on a different, you know, my share sequence, you know, or I could actually come here, the sequence that I just sent to Compressor that is rendering in the background, be like, yeah, you know what, don't like that shot. You know, let's kind of move here, and maybe, oh, let's move this one too, you know, this one, and extend this guy out. All the while, I'm still encoding. And the last thing that I will leave you with, because I'm just going to cancel this, because on a notebook, obviously, there are two things going on. You know, Final Cut is rendering anything it needs to render and handing it off to Compressor in the background, and Compressor's encoding it on this little notebook. Not as many resources as on a Mac Pro. But the other new feature, and you see this in motion as well, is this share. And notice some things that are kind of similar. Apple TV, Blu-ray, DVD, iPhone, MobileMe, YouTube. If I come here, Blu-ray, and it'll take a second because again it's doing an analysis of my hardware. And then I click, oh, you know what? Let's make the disc too. And that same window that you saw in Compressor is here as well. So the integration of the best parts of the new Compressor, they also gave access to those best parts to Final Cut and Motion. So you can come directly out of your Final Cut sequence and go to a Blu-ray, go to a DVD, go right up to MobileMe, and you're basically still accessing Compressor because if you notice, I can still send this to Compressor and end up with the same batch template type situation I had before, or I can just export it straight from here. And with that, we got it. Am I on time? All right.